Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the University of Lincoln's very first live lounge. We're really excited this evening. As you can see, I am on campus, so we're waiting for our students to arrive at the weekend. But what we have for you today is a taster about the future of gaming computing. So during lockdown, it's been quite a high-profile thing that lots of people have had in their homes, and what we can do is actually you can see what happens at home on your Xboxes, your PlayStations, all of those sort of things. This is about the future. So I'm going to introduce to you our Director of Teaching and Learning, Dr Chris Headleand. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Emma. Sorry.
That's fine. And this evening we're here until 5:15, and Chris, along with his team that I'm going to allow him to introduce, are all going to talk to you and show you all sorts of developments that the University of Lincoln in the School of Computing do. What I want you to do also is ask questions. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So please ask questions on the side or at the bottom. And if you've got any questions that aren't necessarily related to sort of the discussion that's going on, then please go onto our webpage, on our homepage, and ask questions. We've got a team of experts that are working until 5:30 today. So, Chris, you have 45 minutes to convince me that gaming computing is the future, and I will come back at the end and have a little reflection, see if I've learned anything from you all.
Cheers, Emma. Well, I would say it's the past, present, and future. Excellent. Games are all around us, to paraphrase. So I'm here to introduce the team I work with. Well, some of the team I work with at University of Lincoln Computer Science Departments. Kieran, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So hi, everyone. I'm Kieran Hicks. I'm a lecturer at the University of Lincoln in the School of Computer Science. I mainly teach on the games computing course across a wide variety of different games modules, particularly around kind of game design and game development. My research area kind of looks around the player experience and how we can make games better, and also how we can make games more accessible. So I've done quite a lot of work with specialized audiences to make games specifically for them.
And Danny?
Oh, hi, I'm Danny Threlfall. I've just graduated doing computer science. I'm now a PhD student. My research area, I guess, is using games to help relax individuals and help reduce anxiety for new or returning students. That's what I'm looking at currently. Yeah, I guess that's me.
And if you're wondering why Danny has so many ribbons on the back of her chair, Danny's also a champion show jumper.
I'm not a champion show jumper. I just dabble in it a little bit.
It's very good. Yeah. And then on the top, we've got Ben.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Williams. I'm a PhD student and research assistant in the School of Computer Science. I mainly focus on the games computing side of things. So most of the modules I demonstrate on are the games modules. My research is mostly around virtual reality and motion simulation. So yeah, I think that kind of summarizes what I'm about.
And obviously we'll go more into the specific research areas as we kind of go through this talk. So as I was so nicely introduced, my name's Chris Headleand. I'm the school's Director of Teaching and Learning. In addition to what I do at the University of Lincoln, I also run a games development company. And I do a lot of research into video games, virtual reality, and ultimately how games can be used as a teaching tool. Now, this is what we do at the University of Lincoln, right? So we are all computer scientists, and everyone here is involved in some way in games development. So what we're going to try and do through this talk, and I really encourage people to ask questions throughout the session. If you have any kind of burning queries, desires, whatever, ask us and we'll do our very best to answer them. But we're all here to talk about a different aspect of the future of gaming. So something, that's happening to all of us at the moment is, we're experiencing a different kind of life. I always think the word unprecedented is possibly overused. And once we get through COVID, I really want that word banning from the dictionary. But we do live in unprecedented times. And it's really interesting how people have turned to gaming as one of their kind of outputs. Now, Kieran, Obviously does a lot of research in social gaming. So, Kieran, how have you seen the world of gaming and gamers kind of respond to the current environment we find ourselves in?
Yeah, so I think you're correct in kind of pointing out that during this kind of the current circumstances, a lot of people have turned to gaming, particularly multiplayer gaming, as a way to continue socializing and having fun and as a distraction from the world. And what we've seen actually is there's been a big surge in kind of the popularity of these games where lots of people can play at once. So there's games like Battle Royales that have existed beforehand, but they kind of rose in popularity through this. But then we see kind of like party experiences. So games like Among Us, if anyone's kind of heard of that, is a game that surged in popularity recently. Becoming one of the top selling games on Steam. And it's because it lets you kind of socialize and guides that kind of discussion and talking through the gameplay mechanics that exist in it. And then there's games like Fall Guys, which I've got on display right now, should hopefully show up on the stream in a second. And yeah, so there's games like Fall Guys. I'm not very good at it, so I'm just going to keep moving forward. But again, it's kind of it encourages people to play along and to actually to talk and laugh and kind of spectate and watch other people make stupid mistakes, like I currently am at failing at going through this level. And the point isn't necessarily to win the game. That's merely just a goal that you could potentially aim for. But the point is to have fun with friends, and that's what everyone seems to be doing at the moment.
I think that's a key point, isn't it? Right? I mean, so when we get together, there is an inherently different kind of environment. Say, if we get together for a meeting, it's a different conversation than if we get together over a meal. There's kind of a shared experience there that you can reflect on. When you go out for a meal, there's always the post-meal discussion. Oh, did you try the fish? The fish was great, or maybe the fish was bad. And having that kind of shared event gives you some sort of construct to base your conversation around. And actually, I'm going to bring Ben in at this point. So Ben is obviously doing some research with me, and we've been having meetings, through video games. So we've actually been playing Rocket League. So if anyone's aware of Rocket League, it's a game where you play football in little remote control cars, and it changes the kind of tempo of the meeting, doesn't it, Ben?
Yeah, definitely. It's I think since lockdown we've tried a number of different things. Of course, video games is a unique way to do that, but yeah, it has changed the tempo of the meetings. I think I'm not too sure. I think at least from my personal experience, I feel like I talk more in these meetings because it's more of a casual setting. I think Teams and stuff is very, I want to use the word imposing, but that's probably the wrong word. But it's very serious.
That's true, isn't it? I mean, there's a certain kind of, and again, I open this up to everyone. A video call can feel kind of invasive, right? Because I mean, at the moment, here we are on this stream, and we've invited everyone into our house. You can see my rage of guitars, Kieran's dog tags, Danny's show jumping medals, and Ben's pipe work. There is something that we don't usually open ourselves up to, right? There is something quite unifying when we go into a meeting space at work. This is a shared space. It puts us on a level, whereas now we're having to give people a look into our lives in kind of a different way. I mean, and yes, we can turn off the camera, but that makes it a different meeting entirely. We pick up a lot from seeing people's facial expressions, and it is actually quite nice to be able to see each other's face.
Yeah, it loses when you turn that camera off. It loses that personal kind of interaction you would normally have in a face-to-face meeting. So, yeah, by having like meetings within games, you can still have that kind of social interaction, but in more of a fun environment and an engaging way.
And do you think that's and I'll open this up to all of you, and actually we might come back to you, Danny, based on your research, but I always think there's something quite nice in games, especially when you can design your own avatar, that you can design representation of how you want to be seen. There's kind of a nice kind of, so when we get up and we go out for work, we dress a certain way because that's how we want people to see us. I really like being able to customize my avatar and actually kind of express different moods through that. And Kieran, I noticed in Fall Guys you've had to have a certain character, and And do you find that? I mean, I'm thinking like old things like the old Wii's and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so I think it's exactly that, right? It's a way to express yourself a little bit differently than you can normally do in real life. But I think the extra bit is that it also lets you kind of start a discussion, right? So we can look at, my Fall Guys character, I think he has like a headband on, if I remember correctly, right? And that's, why is he wearing that headband? And it prompts people to start talking about that. And the same with kind of massively multiplayer games or things like Fortnite, where we have like a wide a range of different skins, and kind of you pick that skin and it says something about your personality that other people can then pick up on that you've chosen to share, right? So it's not something that you have to share forcefully. It's something that you pick. This is me, and I'm putting me out there. And I think that's really nice.
And Danny, I noticed you smiled on that. So you play quite a lot of multiplayer games. How do you kind of see that way that you present yourself?
Well, it is a way to express yourself, and I started to play Rocket League now, and all the different colors you can make your car and all the different details you can have on it, and it kind of just opens up like, oh cool, they I don't really know what I'm trying to say. It just shows you kind of your interests, and maybe on another game I could be have horse orientated outfits, and that's that kind of shows you an in-depth into who I am as a person and my interests.
And it's interesting actually. I keep seeing more of these kind of customization options coming. I mean, I can remember back in the days of the Wii. For anybody who remembers the Nintendo Wii, it was really revolutionary, wasn't it? Where you had these Wii's and but now it's yeah, exactly. I would kind of almost feel I would feel like a game was missing something now if it didn't have that level of customization. And Ben, what kind of games are you playing at the moment? Do you see much customization?
Well, funnily enough, like Danny, I play quite a fair bit of Rocket League. Outside of that, I haven't really played that much. I think Rocket League's the main one I focus on. It's funny, Danny was talking about customization. You can get certain banners, like if you support a gaming channel on YouTube, you can get a certain flag. And an interesting thing I found is if I put on a flag that I like as a YouTube channel, I start getting I start riling up the other team because they support another channel. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah. Things have gone full circle when people are getting quite riled up based on their favorite YouTubers. And I mean, this is kind of this idea of being able to express. I think this is one of the things that we will see more and more in games. Again, I almost feel slightly shortchanged when I don't have that option. I mean, I don't know if I remember Team Fortress 2, but it was one of the first games to really kind of embed that customization as kind of a core aspect of the gaming community, where not only were you kind of changing the looks and changing the styles of your characters, but you were also kind of designing your own stuff and selling it and putting it on a store, and that really changed the mechanic. It changed the kind of community-driven aspect of that. And Kieran, are you seeing many games moving in that direction?
So, yeah, so to some extent, right? And so there's a few games on Steam now that have kind of leveraged that idea of the storefront where players can create content for that game and then sell it, to other players. Obviously, as you said, Team Fortress 2 really pioneered the idea of avatar customization being entirely vanity driven. And I think that was really interesting. And we've seen that ripple out to near enough every single game that's coming out this year, at least. Even single player games where you typically don't, you're not engaged with anyone else. So there's no reason to necessarily want to express yourself to show off to someone. They still have these kind of appearance changes and vanity options because players just like to be able to customize whatever they're currently playing, right? You want to be able to customize that avatar even if it's in a single player.
To make your experience more personal within that game and have your impact on that game, and the way it changes the way you kind of experience it.
So one thing we do in the School of Computer Science is we do these live streams for students. So it's similar to this, but we play a video game, and you've all done one of these with me in the past. We jump in. We jump in and we play Sea of Thieves together, and we use that as a Q&A for the students. And I've always found it quite interesting as a as a way of kind of breaking down barriers, right? And for me, there's nothing more humanizing than watching somebody in a kind of a perceived position of power doing something awfully. And one of my kind of best memories of this is in Sea of Thieves, you have barrels and you have chests, and you kind of grab these things and you try and blow up with each other's ships. I can remember accidentally jumping off a ship with a bucket of tea, like tea leaves, and trying to, and it was hilarious. It was because, you know, students see me as a games lecturer and assume, oh, this guy must be good at games, and actually quite often I'm not. And it creates that shared event. The amount of people who came to me the next day and said, Chris, that was really funny, or Chris, you're an absolute idiot. That was, you know, that created a shared event that we could work around. So I'm just going to throw this out. If anybody's got any questions about any of this stuff that we're talking about, feel free to just post it in the comments, and we'll answer them live. Don't wait to the end. If you've got any questions, just jump in. We'll do our best to answer.
I have a question, actually, Chris, before we move on.
Let's go.
So you said, you know, you've started playing Rocket League with Ben and potentially Danny as well, as kind of a way of having meetings.
Oh yeah. Yes, Chris.
And so, like, I'm kind of curious, like, do you start getting competitive when you're playing? Are you playing against each other, or are you playing against like AI? Like, what's kind of the dynamic there? Like,
so I've done this. So this is the embarrassing part. I've done this with Ben, but not with Danny. wait, no, which is the directions. I've done this with Ben, but not Danny.
Yeah.
It's kind of a control study. Now, Danny's, to clarify here, Danny's only just started a PhD, so we've only just started doing supervisory meetings. So we've not exposed her to Rocket League just yet. But when we've been doing this, Ben, we've been playing on the same team, haven't we? There's been a cooperative element rather than competitive, and which is quite good because Ben is significantly better at Rocket League than I am. But again, that's something I find with Sea of Thieves as well, is that facilitates communication. I mean, we all know. So I think everybody at some point has been to one of those embarrassing team building exercises. You know, you get a job and, right, okay, you've got to make the rope bridge over the bit of mud, or, you know, here's 2 planks, make a tower. But that event, that cooperation creates a different type of communication itself. You've got a shared objective and a shared goal. And yes, we can do that in meetings naturally, right? We have something that we want to get out of that meeting, but sometimes the goal is beyond the objective. And this is one thing I'm slightly worried about with the kind of COVID situation, with the added restrictions. We lose our kind of water cooler moments. You know, the amount of conversations that I think all of us have had where we'll just bump into each other in a corridor and we say, how are you doing? What are you up to? Where have you been? Kieran, how's your dog? But with yeah, well, that's good to hear. But without the without this kind of social interaction, you know, the thing that's been necessitated by social distancing, we lose those water cooler moments. And for me, that's when we find like points of innovation. So I worry about that, but I think playing games gives you that water cooler moment. You know, it breaks down that kind of formality of the meeting. You know, our entire day isn't formal. I mean, that's not why we do. I don't think that's true of any job, right? I mean, you still do chat, you discuss, and I think by scheduling everything that we're doing down to the minute, I think we lose some of that. And games have been able to bring some of that back in. Now, I want to pass to you on this, Kieran, ever slightly, because I'm aware of some of your earlier research into icebreakers. So can you just give us a bit of an overview of that? Yeah,
of course. So for my master's, I actually spent some time looking at how voice communication is used in games. This particularly around the time where we were seeing more and more games basically force voice communication upon players, because game designers would make experiences and challenges that would need some sort of communication channel to allow to meet those challenges. And so there's games like Overwatch where, and you're playing in ranked competitive play, and you need to be able to communicate to your teammates to be able to succeed. And yet, you're kind of dropped into voice communication, and you're expected to speak to other people that you've never met before, potentially reveal personal aspects of your life. that's, you know, that's actually quite scary for a lot of players. So what I was looking at was if we could introduce kind of game icebreaker challenges. So rather than the kind of awkward icebreaker stuff you do, you know, on your first day of school and whatnot, it was kind of surrounded around the game experience and sharing personal information through the game as a way of breaking that ice. And we found that quite successful. And yeah, it's definitely something I think we'll see happen more and more, where more games require rich communication to succeed at the challenges.
And this is actually something we see a lot now with, you know, with so much teaching being online. I've started using little icebreaker games in Teams calls, you know, just to start that communication flowing, and actually saying, look, this is a space where you can express, where you can discuss. One of my favorite ones at the moment, I've got a whole bunch of classic video games intro music, like, you know, the Sonic and Mario intros, and I play like a 10-second clip, and, you know, whoever gets it first wins a wonderful prize. I've just seen we've got a comment coming from Mark. What's your favorite era of gaming?
Can I tackle this one first?
Yeah, look, you go for it.
I've got an answer ready to go because this is a clear-cut one for me. So my favorite era of gaming would be kind of the early 2000s towards the late 2000s and kind of 10-ish, where MMOs, so massively multiplayer online games, were really taking off. So there was kind of EverQuest, there was World of Warcraft, there was Guild Wars, and as someone that just loves those type of multiplayer massive experiences, that was the you know, that was perfection to me. Obviously, it's gone downhill a little bit since then, but that would be my favorite era of gaming.
And how about you, Danny?
Oh, well, I'm a Nintendo fan through and through. Animal Crossing has consumed my life. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Do you prefer the original or the new version?
Well, I do enjoy the new version, but I think the original it still like holds my heart. Like, I love just
it has some charm.
Yeah,
I miss my pixelated froggy chair.
Yeah,
that was
yeah. Like, I like being able to customize your island and being able to change like a lot of different aspects of it. But I think what Animal Crossing, like, that core was that you move in and you talk to that the village, well, the people in your town, and you collect like furniture and you make your house, and that was what your kind of customization area was, rather than like, well, now you can customize everything's customized. So I feel like that brings to that point, and everything on the island is customizable. Your appearance, your island, your house, and it's a great way to add more of that customizable feature.
Following the trend that we were talking about earlier.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, I was actually watching one of mine and Kieran's friends was spending a lot of time dedicated to her rock garden, which was fantastic to watch it evolve over time.
Yeah.
And Ben, what's your favorite era gaming?
I would say probably I'm quite a big fan of retro games, but I have a very particular reason why I like. I would say probably the early 80s to late 80s. There was a lot of just from a games developer perspective, some of the most innovative solutions we've seen to like the way games are developed came about through the fact that they didn't have much to work with, and they had to circumvent these by coming up with really innovative solutions. I just going through some of those. I think that's my thing. And I also love playing retro games. I don't know what it is.
There's something really nice about this, and if I had a lot more time, I'd loop over to Kieran to talk about juiciness and the some of the kind of mechanics that we. So if you wear a juiciness, it's this kind of embellishment that we put into games, sound and shake and stuff. And a lot of those came out of that period in the 80s, you know, in really kind of development stuff. And in a second, I'll go to George White's question, which how do you think AI will go in game? But we'll come back to that in a second, because there's an interesting segue into that question, Ben, in when you're saying how the tricks that old games developers used. We didn't have memory, you know. People forget that, you know, we were working on next to no memory. You couldn't have thousands of maps stored on a card. So what we used to do was we wrote a piece of code that would generate these maps on the fly. And that was really some of the first kind of artificial intelligence procedural content in games. Was really just to get around this limitation of memory. And so I'll close this one off before going to George's question. my favorite era is probably going to have to be the early 90s educational games. The reason I say that, so I'm an educationalist at heart, but I generally think that was a massive renaissance. That was just such a change point in gaming. So if you go back to that era, the only people who really owned PCs were schools, because they were so expensive. So if you wanted to be a games developer, you probably developed education games because that was your biggest market. And some of the titles that we saw in that period, things like Arc Venture, there was an archaeology game, there was Badger Trails. These were really good, well-developed games that with mechanics that we see even today, in our kind of modern gaming. And they were developed for education. And actually, I think that was fantastic. And on that, I'll actually bring in George Wyatt's question on how do you think AI will go in gaming? Now, in a second, I'm going to share my screen because I think, and we'll see whether I can actually take off my plane. So this sometimes goes well, it sometimes goes very poorly. So I want to bring up Microsoft Flight Simulator, which has been relatively recently released. Now, for me, one of the massive areas that gaming AI is going to go is some of the tools that we see in this game. Let's see if I can take off without crashing. So what I'm actually taking off from here is a little airstrip just outside of Lincoln. And I'm flying over and around Lincoln. Right, so this is RAF Waddington for anyone who's local to the area. And this is basically what RAF Waddington looks like. And the developers who've made this game have done an absolutely fantastic job in creating this experience. Because the way it works is they actually... Sorry, every time I pause, it's because I'm looking to make sure I'm not crashing. What they've used is aerial photos, and they've used artificial intelligence in the cloud to develop. So if you're aware of RAF Waddington, there are the planes parked up there. And actually, if I keep flying this direction, eventually I'll get to the university. And maybe I'll come back to this screen share in a second to show that I've actually got there. But this is fantastic. The entire world exists within Microsoft Flight Simulator. So you can actually, if there's a tree, there's a tree there. If there's a building, there's a building there. And it doesn't look exactly how it does in the real world, but it's pretty close. And like I said, they've gone through that by taking the power of kind of Google Maps, Bing Maps, these kind of massive databases of aerial photographs and generating a world from that. And I really see the kind of artificial intelligence of games going in that direction. And Ben, I mean, you've done a lot of stuff on AI and procedural content generation. I mean, I remember some of your early research into trees, for example.
Yeah. So I think it's a really interesting question. Procedural content generation, I think early sort of research was more rule-based, where we kind of decided what, for example, the paper I made, my first paper was on the generation of forests, and that was a rule-based sort of system. So we said, this is how a forest should develop. But what we're seeing now in the future of procedural content generation in games is we're just passing that off to a computer with a neural network and just saying, you decide, and these generate very realistic results. But yeah, I think AI can go really far with content generation in games. And the cool thing about this area is you can do so much. I mean, with the recent GPT-2 algorithm for text generation, people have started to look into that for generating narratives.
And can we share my screen again, please? So for anybody who's aware of Lincoln, so I'm now flying over the Brayford Pool, right?
Oh, wow.
That's the Brayford Pool. And if I take over here, here's the Isaac Newton building. This is where the School of Computer Science is based. And I'm going to really try not to crash into my office. And this is the railway line. And the railway is such a massive part of our culture at Lincoln, right? It's, the getting from one side of the tracks to the other is a big part. It's part of our kind of shared experience. We're talking about this idea of shared events earlier. That's one of them. So we've had another question in from Hannah. And if we stop sharing the screen now, because I do worry about crashing somewhere. We've had a question coming from Hannah. What's the most unique design concept you've seen students come up with? I've got an answer to this, but I'm going to pass over to Kieran because there's one recently from one of our modules that really stands out in my mind.
Yeah, so I'll talk about. There's this. We have a module in the second year called Concept Development, and basically in that module, students are kind of tasked with creating games, but we normally have some quite strict kind of requirements for how they design those games. And so in this one, a student basically made a platformer, which is a fairly simple game. And the requirement they had was that there was like a fixed amount of moves. And so what they did is they made this game, like this platformer game, where you could only jump a certain amount of times, and then depending on how many times you jumped, like how much of your jump allocation you used, you'd then have to go through the level backwards using the remaining amount of jumps. So it turned what's normally a really simple platformer into a kind of puzzle game where you have to really think 20 steps ahead of your current move. And that was a really interesting concept.
Now, the other one I'd like to bring up, and I'm going to embarrass her here, but there's actually one that Danny came up with for her dissertation project. Because I think the idea behind that was absolutely fantastic. Do you want to go into that, Danny?
Right. So from my dissertation, if we want to bring up my game here. So for my dissertation, I created an environment to expose individuals to crowded environments. So here we have like a safe space where, so the whole thing was kind of based on REIT, which is one of Chris's favorite words.
Do you want to say what REIT stands for?
Yeah, it means virtual reality exposure therapy. And exposure therapy is a type of systematic desensitization, which kind of exposes individuals to a series of anxiety-invoking stimuli. So if you have a phobia of crowds, you can use environment to slowly desensitize people to like a bigger and larger crowd. So to begin with, you start off with a smaller crowd. So this environment here has a relatively small crowd within the market scene, and the people there. So what am I trying to say? However, my project was kind of centered around testing for immersion and presence. So can this actually be used? Can it be a viable therapy device to then be used within a therapy kind of environment? So each different character might kind of subtly look at you to create more of a human reaction, kind of have those subtle human interactions. I think I just repeated myself there.
I think one of the important things about this was it's kind of a game for good, right? It's something that you can play, something you can expose yourself to, and it's safe, and it's something that we can control. But I think the nice thing about this, and this is probably going to come on to the next question I've just spotted in the chat. One of the nice things about one of the things I really love about dissertation projects is they can go further. Things that, for example, Kieran did for his dissertation that I'm aware of what he did at his undergrad has been out and published, and it has led to an actual formal game being published and released and sold on the Steam store. You've created a game that could, have therapeutic applications, and that's led to you doing a PhD. And I really like this. It's one of the kind of joys of software, I think, that you can always kind of take things that slight next level. You can always build on it. And that leads on to this next question. Oh, sorry, Danny.
No, yeah, I was going to talk about what that led on to my PhD, but I feel like we're going to discuss that later, maybe.
Oh, yeah. We'll come back. We'll back to it. So, okay. Nicola got a question saying, what are your favorite modules to teach Chris and Kieran? I know what my favorite module is to teach, so I'll start with you, Kieran.
Okay, that seems fair. So yeah, I think so. I'm quite lucky in that I get to deliver on a lot of different games modules, and I genuinely enjoy teaching on all of them. But I think my current favorite is a fourth year module called Prototype and Evaluation, and basically it's a module that surrounds basically making lots of prototypes of games. So fleshing out an idea of an experience or a mechanic, turning that into a prototype, and then having people play it and actually do the evaluation to see, is this mechanic good? Is it going to make a good player experience? Is it worth proceeding further? And so in that module, we kind of have students make 4 or 5 different prototypes over quite a tight schedule. So you only have like 2 weeks to make that prototype. But what that allows for is they make a ton of games with interesting mechanics that I like, and I get to then see and play and give feedback on. I really like that aspect of the module.
So my favorite module to teach is actually a second year module called Team Software Engineering. So I really like that for 2 reasons. I teach ethics on that, and Danny and Ben are both laughing because they've both had my ethics lectures, so they know what that's all about.
Yeah.
A lot of hilarity ensues, but I will save the surprise for anybody who's coming to join us. But I quite like teaching ethics, and I quite like teaching about being a professional computer scientist, because that's what we all aspire to be. But the big thing I like about that module is also because it's a group project. And I really like the fact that, the things that you can develop as individuals, you can do so much more as a team. You can specialize. You can have one person work on the graphics and one person work on the mechanics, somebody else in the background doing this kind of the AI. And I think that's really cool. I think it gives you a lot of scope to develop a really fantastic portfolio piece. And we've had some games developed through that have been just absolutely mind-boggling, right?
Yeah, fantastic.
And Danny and Ben have both been to my ethics lectures, and so I'm going to put you on the spot. Are they good? Don't worry, you don't have to answer that. It's fine.
They were actually really interesting because we got to talk about different ethical conundrums and different and discuss them as a whole lecture, and we got to put our ideas in, and some were controversial, but it was fun at the end of the day.
But a safe space to discuss. I think that's important, right?
Yeah.
Because as computer scientists and as games developers, we actually do have this massive ethical responsibility, and it's something that maybe we don't talk about as much as we should. But there is, if you look at a lot of the kind of ethical debates that are going on, it is around data, it's around computing. And how should we store data? What should we share? We've had all these things with GDPR recently, which is, I just find it super interesting. Yeah. So on that, there's one kind of thing I want to kind of move on to, and again on this kind of future of gaming theme. Something that we've all been, there's kind of a running theme here. We've all worked quite closely with virtual reality. Danny's obviously doing her research into desensitization and anxiety, and using virtual reality as tools for the kind of social good. Kieran's done various projects on kind of exergaming and working with specialized audiences. So my company publishes VR titles. But when we talk about the future, I mean, virtual reality in itself isn't the future. I think virtual reality is here now, and the speed of adoption, most people hold, at least somewhere on their desk, a mobile phone. There we go. That you can kind of slot into a device and make yourself a VR headset. It's there and it's accessible. Where I see the future going, and I'm going to look over to Ben in a second, is this idea of peripheral content. The idea that when we immerse ourselves into these worlds, it's not just about seeing this place, but feeling and sensing it as well. Ben, can I pass over to you?
Yeah, sure. So this is one area of really interest in, and in particular my research, we're looking at virtual reality and these alternative modalities of I'm not sure what the word is, but
sense, I suppose.
Yeah, it's one of those areas where it's really hard to come up with words and stuff. But yeah, so for example, we can use motion simulators to cue movement. So as you play the game, and if I share my screen here, this is an example. I'll put this in full screen. So this is an example of the motion chair there in the top right. As playing the game.
And that's actually our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Liz Mossop, driving our motion simulator.
Yeah. So as you play the game, the game responds and cues the motion simulator for you to make the chair move. We've also looked at other things like providing a sensation of somatic feedback, so air whilst you move, so you get that feeling, and kind of supplementing the virtual reality experience with these alternative ways of providing feedback. So this can go as far as things like haptic feedback, you've got air against your skin, you've got the motion simulator moving, and a really interesting thing about that is all this type of equipment is becoming cheaper. These motion simulators used to cost, I don't know, probably about 15 years ago. It's probably, I'm not sure the price, but it was
about £500,000, really.
Yeah, something crazy. These used to cost loads and loads of money. But nowadays, I think it was last year I checked. I checked with Chris actually. They were only about £900, and because of that, these things are, they're fairly expensive, but they are slowly making their way into the mainstream. I think that's something really interesting that we should look at. But it's
I think that's kind of interesting, because I think once a device kind of comes under that £1,000 mark, it almost becomes a consumer level device, right? I mean, I still remember not too long ago when it wasn't usual spend. You could spend £1,000 on a good television, right?
Yeah.
Now we're talking about these full motion platforms where we can feel the world, we can feel a car respond, and for anybody, I think everybody's been in the motion simulator in this call. It feels like a real car. You turn around a corner, you feel the suspension go, and when you add that air as well, let's say in that particular video, Ben, you're driving an open top car. Yeah. You expect to feel wind in your face, and if you don't feel wind in your face, it feels wrong. But we can start adding these compensations, adding these kind of layers on layers to create this kind of more full gaming experience. Now, we're coming towards the end. So I think we've got about 5-ish minutes. So if there's any questions on the comments at all, feel free to throw them in. We're going to do our very best to answer them. If you got something specific you want to ask about the student experience, Danny's been undergraduate all the way through with us, just starting a PhD. Ben joined us at MSc and is now doing his PhD, and Kieran's been here since basically the Roman times.
Certainly feels like it.
So if any questions, just feel free to post them in the chat, and we'll do our very best to answer. But if there's any thing I think I'd like to kind of take from this kind of discussion, and this fairly round table, and we've kind of not pre-prepared much of this. The gaming tends to be moving towards, I think, more immersive, more social. I think there's a lot of things where we're trying to create, environments where people can express themselves further. I think gaming is becoming more of an expressive art, and there's actually an example I want to give, and this ties it back to the kind of COVID discussion. When we first went into lockdown, I ended up having somebody's grandmother drop me an email asking what was, they couldn't see their grandchildren, what was a really good game to play. It was the first time they'd ever played a video game, and did we have any advice? I think that's really interesting. I think we're going to find one of the outcomes of the current situation is that the gaming demographics will have changed. I think more people will have turned to games as kind of one of those social interactions. Actually, we just had one question jump up. What's the best way to get into computer science from a beginner's perspective? I'm going to pass that to Ben. What would you say? Because I know you do quite a lot of support for first year students. So what tends to be your main advice?
I get asked this quite a lot. I think the best way is to just do as much as you can. Don't be the thing I find with first years is they try to get the textbooks and read the textbooks. But if something like a video or just trying it out yourself works best, just get stuck in. Just for example, when I got into this stuff, I find it really exciting just to go and try bits of code, play around with it. And I think naturally as computer scientists, that's how we work. We want to take things apart, see how it works. That's my advice. Just try as much as you can. Just look at tutorials on YouTube, whatever you
take apart the toaster method. Pull it apart and see what the pieces are, right? Yeah. I would absolutely agree. I mean, I think actually just the best part is just pick something you want to build and try and build it, There's loads of, again, I think one of the benefits we've got from COVID at the moment is there's so many fantastic resources online. I don't think there's ever been more fantastic resources available. I mean, even in the university, we're starting to publish some of our stuff in an accessible way, because it's there. There's so much stuff out there. Danny, what helped you kind of when you were first getting into computer science?
Oh, I mean, I just ended up just trying and do random bits of programming or doing some random tutorials online. A lot of my help was from the demonstrators in first year, asking questions and trying to talk to people who were knowledgeable in the area and just getting their kind of opinions and things and their kind of expert opinions and expert kind of knowledge, and just talking and just practicing. Practice makes perfect, as they say.
And what about Kieran?
I'm nowhere near perfect, but like at coding. Yeah.
And what do you think, Kieran?
So I'm going to echo Ben's statement exactly, right? The best way I think to kind of learn when you're trying to get into programming is find something that you're interested in, take it apart, start playing with it. Particularly, if you're trying to get into games programming, there's a wealth of open source games and engines you can look at. Download them, just start tweaking some of the variables in the code to begin with, see how that affects the game, right? What happens if I change the height of the jump? How does that manifest in the game? And just start playing with the code would be my advice.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to, I think we're going to have our moderator come back in a second. But I kind of going to wrap up all that and say, look, find the medium that works for you. For some people, that book is ideal. Find a really good beginner's book that's recommended. Maybe contact a lecturer or somebody, see if they've got any advice. But for a lot of people, the first kind of steps is things like YouTube, is online tutorials. You can't go wrong by just giving it a go. And the last comment we've got on the chat is from Sheena. Big shout out from the Philippines. Well, thank you to the Philippines.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. That was amazing. I think it's not only sort of enlightened me with all sorts of information, one being what Rocket League is, because I had no idea what that was. And last night I was like, oh, right, that's really cool. Now I know what it is. So that's helpful. I think I'm with Ben with the fact that the 80s and the early 90s games were more sort of my era, so I think I probably understand those. And I think the advice that you've given we could be advice across absolutely any course or any sort of knowledge that we do. Sort of practice makes perfect. I'm pretty certain, Daniel, that your horse riding has come, and those rosettes have come from a lot of practice.
Yeah.
And probably a lot of falling off as well, right? And I think that's important, You learn by breaking things.
You learn by failure, don't you? Breaking a few bones, perhaps, along the way.
Probably not. Not with code, at least.
I think coding, hopefully, that is not the case, is it?
Extreme coding.
Extreme, very extreme. So thank you so much. Absolutely amazing. And really sort of fun to listen to you all as well. So I absolutely loved it. Anybody that is watching, please don't feel that this is the end. Please ask us any questions that you've got. The team are here till 5:30, so whether it's about the university, moving in, sort of entry requirements to any of our courses, anything like that about your journey, sort of anything really, we are here to answer, within reason, obviously. But finally, thank you. But tonight doesn't end here. We are here as a team to answer any questions that you have on this application journey, whether you are sort of in year 9, year 10, or year 13 at the moment.
And we hope to see some of you at the open day.
We certainly will. I'm getting to that, Chris. I'm getting to that. On Sunday the 11th of October, between 10 and 2. Please join us on our virtual open day. Just join us on our website, click in, listen again to sort of Chris about computing and
see me and Danny.
I'm here too.
Excellent. Brilliant, Danny, and I'll be here as well, so it can be a good run. And equally, thank you, and we hope that you can join us on Sunday as well. But throughout the journey, please join us. Thank you ever so much, and good night.